My name is Amarna Miller. I'm a porn star, and I was born in a hypocritical country where the same people calling me a whore jerk off watching my videos. A country that loves life, but allows killing in the name of art. A country outraged at corruption that still votes for thieves. Where they save the same banks that evict thousands of families. A country that says it is secular while decorating the Virgin Mary. That treats migrants as heroes and immigrants like trash. A country where those who are supposed to be moral guardians can be the most dangerous. Where prostitution is still not legal, but where the number of clients grow every year. A country that is supposed to be open and tolerant, where a referee receives death threats for being gay. Yes, we live in a disgustingly hypocritical country, but some of us do not give up. Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Abarca with co-host, socialist and teacher Andy Lipson, teacher and writer Jessica Holmes, and community organizing socialist Kenny Cepeda. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find any of our episodes on that blog or wherever you found this episode. We invite listeners to or viewers to subscribe to any of our platforms that I will list at the end because I don't remember them all right now, but there are 9 of them and you can find them on our wherever you found this episode on the episode notes. So today we'll be discussing a topic that deals with adult content. So this is a disclaimer for folks that are listening, viewers and listeners. If you're listening to this on your commute, or if you're listening to this as you're in the kitchen or wherever you're at, or viewing this, I advise you take note that I am now stating that we will be discussing adult content. So if you have any minors around, maybe this might not be a very good time to listen to this episode. Or if you're just uncomfortable by some of the things that we'll be discussing, this is your opportunity to turn to a different episode. All right. I will start off by saying I want to wish Andy a very early happy birthday before next week. It's his birthday. So I know that we've had I don't remember the anniversary for this What's Left, our birthday for What's Left, but I do know Andy's in July.
July 18th.
It is on Monday, right?
Yes, July 18th.
All right.
Thank you.
So we wish you all from What's Left a very happy birthday, Andy. And also the public and our audience that has been like a cult following here will also, I'm sure, say happy birthday in the comments. Thank you
yes.
for that, if you do.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Right. So I've got some notes I will be discussing today. We will be discussing adult content now. I will say we'll discuss sex work. We'll discuss the sex industry. We'll discuss my personal journey. We'll discuss sex work here in Colombia, as well as the future of sex, like sex tech. And what that means as it relates to the 4th Industrial Revolution. So that will be the topics that we'll be discussing today. I really hope, Andy and Kenny and Jessica, that you will put on the audience hat and really ask questions that I know the audience will want to ask. If I don't feel comfortable answering something, or if I don't think that I want to answer something about someone else's life, I just won't answer it. That's the way this is going to go. I want to, something I always here that I am in Colombia, something I always teach I don't teach it. I mean, something I give counsel to my fellow other workers, sex workers. I tell them, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. I mean, it's kind of a simple concept, but it's hard to understand that you don't ever have to do anything you don't want to do. So I will respond to questions that I think that the audience might ask, or you can pose, and I will either answer it, I will dodge it, or I will figure out a way to answer it in the most appropriate manner, with also not giving everything away, maybe if I feel like it. So I guess I'll start off with the very first question that someone had posed in the YouTube comment. And that was relating to my Jehovah's Witness background and how I came to be a sex worker later, right? I think that's a fair question. But I've also shared with people already some of my Jehovah's Witness background. So it's kind of been sprinkled around some episodes. I don't want to go and delve into it completely. I think we can do another episode regarding religion and inviting other guests who've also been in other religious cults, and that will be a separate episode. But just to give a brief story, or rather just to share how it's connected to what I've done when I was 18. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. I was instructed with Bible principles. I was very much involved. I wasn't just someone that was seated and attended. It was an actual involvement, like really engaged. My mother raised me as a strict Jehovah's Witness. So we did everything. We went to Bible study. We call them meetings. They're like church attendings. There were 3 days of the week and you had to study the Bible. I've read the Bible from front to back. Of course, I've only understood it maybe half of that. I don't really think I've understood the whole thing, but 3 times, because you're supposed to read the Bible daily and you're supposed to read Jehovah's Witness literature daily. You're supposed to take notes at the meetings. You're supposed to study the literature that they give you for book readings. And so you are raised neutrally politically. You never put your hand on your heart when I was in Mexico to pledge allegiance to the flag, or in the USA when I went to school there. And I know that most people know Jehovah's Witnesses for their preaching and for their not celebrating religion or holidays, no? And that's true. So I did a lot of preaching, lots of hours, and also we did not celebrate holidays such as birthdays, which is difficult for me because I don't even celebrate my own birthday. And I don't have the challenge remembering other people's birthdays. And so I try to put it and plug it into my calendar. So please don't get offended if I don't remember your birthday, because I don't even celebrate mine. I guess what is important for people to know is that I got baptized when I was 12 years old. And that is the time that Jesus was like in Jerusalem talking to priests and sacerdotes, ¿cómo se dice? Like very high priests in the Jewish in the Jewish religion. And so I was 12 years old. I was just very inspired. I had a true deep connection with God at that time, and so I believed, and I prayed every day. And as anyone knows, like you have this. I mean, as I think anyone who has a religious background might have this very intense religious connection with God. I'm not going to delve into why. Probably like I thought I did or didn't. I think that's for the religion episode. For me, it was very deep. And then I was growing up. So as I grew up, you make mistakes. And I was an adolescent. And so from 12 until 14, I was finding my way. And as an adolescent, I made mistakes. And then I was reproved, which is second to, it is one of the most punitive, it's a punitive in a sense that you're not allowed to do any more spiritual activities. So for example, you're not allowed to preach, or you are allowed to preach, but you're not allowed to preach directly. You accompany someone else. At least these were the rules for me at the time. And so I'm going to fast forward. There was that affected me a lot. And I attended the Spanish language congregation. And then in the USA, I attended an English language congregation for a brief period of time. And then I attended a sign language congregation. So I went to a different congregation in another language. And those experiences taught me a lot about work ethic, studying, and also just principles and values. That's so ingrained to have direction of your principles and values. What moved me or changed me was when, again, I got reproved when I was 17. And it was so challenging at that point because it was so minor. And I felt like I'd done everything. And this is where it's leading to what I did next. Like I had done everything as a kid to try to prove that I was a committed, faithful Jehovah's Witness, a Christian. And yet I still could not keep up with the high expectations that were placed on me. That was I think that was the biggest blow for me because I had just come out from like being reproved when I was 14 and then again being reproved. I was 17. It was so minor. My faith, it was such a rocky time. So I left. I decided when I was 18, I would finish high school and I would do it independently. So I went to an alternative school. I did somewhat like homeschooling format and I finished my schooling. And as a kid that had like A's and F's, nothing in between, it was very extreme. It was A's for courses. And then it was F's for the ones I just didn't care about. Physics and English and Spanish and French and A's, but everything else F. I just didn't care. But then I decided I would just get a 4.0, and I did. And my last year of high school, and then I thought, where should I go? What should I do after this? And most people apply for university after that. So I did apply to SF State University. I remember being at SF State University and thinking, this isn't for me. Like I went and I thought, this is not for me. So I biked home and I grabbed my bag and I decided to go up to Oregon. And I went up to Oregon. I took a bus, the Greyhound in California. And from there, I decided to take a journey. And I stayed in Oregon with my friend Jake, who's been on these episodes. And then he did whatever with his partner, his girlfriend, who later became his wife. And then I just decided to leave on my own and hitchhike. So I went on my own and I went to the East Coast. And this is where I think the story begins of my life in sex work. When I was in the East Coast, I had a partner who was from Brazil. And that partner, it was disastrous. It was constant fighting in Spanish and Portuguese. And it was not a healthy relationship at all. And at that time, I would spend my summer days just looking for. I would look for things to do, and I loved art, and I would love drawing, and I saw that there were these figure drawing courses, and I thought, I'll do that one day. I'll do that, but they were expensive. I didn't have money at the time. When I finally did break off with my partner at that time, I went back to the East Coast, but this time I decided I would figure out my way just on my own, because I had already wanted to live there. I liked it. And I thought maybe this is a way for me just like be on my own, reinvent myself. That's the word I was looking for, because in the West Coast of California, I had felt everyone knew me. There was Jehovah's Witnesses, our tight community, anything that wherever you are in San Francisco. And to this day, when I'm back in San Francisco, some people do recognize me. Such a tight community. And my mother's story is very well known in the Spanish language community of San Francisco, the Mission District. I mean, San Francisco is so small. You have community members that know you. And I know that it just becomes like this bubble. It's this bubble of people that from my Jehovah's Witness background to now people recognize me for campaigning and activist background to as an educator. So it's just this, I wanted to get away from that, no? I mean, at that time, it was just my Jehovah's Witness background. So I wanted to get away from that. And I wanted to reinvent myself in the East Coast. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know at the time. I just knew it was good for me to be away. And I love the strong seasons of the East Coast. It's like there's just the oranges and the yellows and all of that. And I just love those summers and then the winter. So, but I didn't know how I was going to pull off at that time money. I didn't have an education in college. I just had my journal and I had my rucksack and I had a few things. I had a bit of money, but I didn't, I guess for me, as being someone that had read lots of novels, for me it was, okay, I can be this backpacker. I can just go out there. I had read Into the Wild, if anyone knows that book. And I thought about that character. And I was so glad they made the film afterwards, based on that book. And so I had thought, oh, if he went all the way to Alaska and he was able to, I can survive in the East Coast. I can just be on my own. So I was there sleeping on benches and in churches and wherever I could find some place just to stay. And there were wonderful people who cared for me. To this day, I just think of all the wonderful people who really took care of me. I really do appreciate that. And that's why I think it's always good to give back. And so I remembered that figure drawing course and I went to go look for it. When I went to go look for it, they were looking for art models. An art model is someone that poses, does all these different poses in the center around people who are drawing them. And this was in Massachusetts, in Cambridge. There were lots of students from Harvard, from MIT, these are amazing. Like this being surrounded by this university town, and Cambridge is like Berkeley to, that's how I see it. I don't know if any of you have been to East Coast there, but it just, to me, Cambridge is like Berkeley and Boston is like San Francisco. And I would just take the tube and it was really nice to be in that environment. And so I did that. I decided to take a figure drawing course, to take art modeling, and they paid at that time. It was good. I mean, it was $50 a session. It was what I needed. And if you were working, and at that time it was like, if you just were working 2 hours straight, and then you met other people, it didn't feel like hours. It felt just liberating. I don't know, like someone tried to ask me, what got you started to even do something around nudity to begin with? I think there were several factors. I think it's complex, right? Like for me, the repression of being a Jehovah's Witness and not knowing how to explore my own sexuality, how to explore who I am as an individual, feeling like there's shame in my body. I mean, at home, we didn't even undress. Like I wasn't, like my mother always had us with shirts. We didn't just walk around the home like as an adolescent with shirtless. I never dressed in front of my brother like that. It was very rare. My mother hardly ever talked. Well, she did talk about sex, but my mother didn't undress herself in front of us. It was very conservative in that way. Other topics like conversations around sex were easy to have, but around us, each other, the three of us, because with my stepfather or my father, or we weren't that liberated in that way. Whereas I know friends who've had families where they've even been naked in homes together. That's fine. I just didn't have that. And so I wanted to try, and I said, well, what does it take? I mean, what is it? I mean, it's just going to be once. If I don't like it, I'll just not do it again. And no one knows me here. And this is about my reinvention, right? It's about finding its curiosity. It was about atrevimiento. It was about daring. It was like trying to do something that was, someone else was trying to tell me, you can't do this. And I said, yes, I will do it. It was this rebellious spirit. And at that time, because I still felt this qualms with my Jehovah's Witness background, I said, well, F it. If they really want to punish me, well, they have punish me for nudity, punish me for being so liberal, punish me for cursing, punish me for this, instead of what I got in trouble for. So I did that. That was how it started. So when I had applied, I thought I wasn't going to get contracted or hired for it or taken for it, because I remember the art models there. They were young students. They were students also trying to pay off their college debt, and they were very I thought they were very beautiful. I mean, they were. I thought I'm not going to get accepted either way. So it's like this daring thing. I'm like, I'm just going to do it. I'm not even going to get accepted. And in the East Coast, there aren't many Mexicans. There are like hardly any Latinos, at least like that look like me. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just go. And I had lots of insecurities around myself. But yeah, I got accepted. So when I was asked to do, after some sessions, I remember the director of the studio was the one who really requested me for several sessions for, I guess, my features, my differences in looks. I think for me, when who should I mention here? The assistant of the director asked if I would be willing to do erotic modeling, which has to do with more nudity, but also sexual poses for photography. At first, I thought it was the same, but with different medium and more private sessions. And I thought, okay, it's a step forward. It's more. It was another step towards daring myself to reinvent myself, to find where my limits were.
Just to be clear, I'm trying to follow this. You did get accepted into modeling, regular modeling.
Yeah.
You did do a few sessions, correct?
Yeah.
And you were asked to do those sessions. Those were in the nude. Is that right?
Yeah. All of it in the nude. Yes.
And do you, in those sessions that are not considered the erotic modeling, do they tell you, here's how we want you to stand? Do you get choices in that? And secondly, how long would each session be?
Yeah. Okay. So they could be.
And then go ahead and move. You can move to.
Yeah. So for art modeling, it could be different poses. They have specific poses that they want you to be in. Sometimes they're around other models. Other times they're around other objects. And you can be standing there or sitting there or lying there for anywhere from 5 minutes. If they were doing fast drawings, they had to do fast drawings 5 minutes to 15 minutes to an hour. So it depended on what the course was going to be about. So if they were doing quick sketches, I had to do 5-minute poses, and you learn those poses quick. So there are different poses that I could post for people. I mean, there's some pretty good pictures out there that people can see without seeing genitalia. I mean, the poses have to be in quick succession for art students who want to draw as quickly as possible. And then there are the 15-minute poses for those longer sessions. And then obviously the 1 hour. There wasn't any sexual thing about it. People were I think people giggled. Some people were new, and other people were sort of like enthralled by the whole idea of having an actual life thing there, like in the center, rather than having a sculpture or rather than having some fruit in the middle, right?
And because I do want to move to the next part, but what was the feeling like of doing that? How did that feel comfortable? Did it feel like rebellious? Did it feel affirming? Like what were your feelings about doing that kind of work?
I think I was most impressed by their drawings. I wanted to keep them. The people drew very well. Some people drew me, some beginners, they were not that, I mean, how should I say? I don't want to say good, because art is very, relative. Like you can't say something is good or bad. Some were not as representative. That's how I say it. Not as representative to the body. So I appreciate that kind of art as well today, because, when you begin drawing, I love those beginning drawings. I love how when children draw me, for example, my face, for example, just to be clear. I just love the way that the human form, you begin with line and shape and shadow, right? It's just as simple as that. And whoever begins drawing, they're so insecure and so self, deprecating but you just, art is just art, and you just, anyone can draw. And I just appreciated people drawing me. I felt like the center of attention. I'd never been the center of attention. If anything, I was a very shy kid, and I felt awkward, and I felt ugly, and I felt horrible. And here were people drawing my penis. I mean, it was like that. It was, oh my, and my butt, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, does it really look like that? And I really don't know if I want to look like that, you know. And in the beginning it was uncomfortable, but then, you know, you get used to it, and then the more I realized, the more confident I looked, the more they were comfortable. So I realized if I was showing awkwardness or uncomfortableness, they were showing that as well. I was also feeding onto that. So I would just look like I learned. This is not, to be clear, a fashion model, which is completely different. We're taught those are, I don't know, that's a whole different world. I never could qualify for that. I'm not even the height of that. But to be an art model, they did want, finally, like they had all these, they had these white European looking models, and they all looked the same. So for finally one of them to like me to come forward with different features, with ethnic backgrounds, it's like, oh my goodness, what a difference to draw something like that, you know, instead of drawing another straight edge nose and another chiseled white boy, you know. So I came here onto the scene, and then they were like, oh my goodness, thank goodness, something different. So it was, I was very much appreciated. I think that that was the level of that was the level of connection I felt really good with. In the beginning, obviously, like I said, insecure. I was thinking to myself, I was sweating. I remember sitting there and sweating, thinking they're going to look at every imperfection I have, you know. And looking back, I was very handsome, and I hated myself. I hated myself so much. And yet I was torturing myself and sweating, sweat and sweat. And they would say, like, are you all right? And I was just like, yeah, you know. But I got paid. I got a place to sleep. I could sleep in the studio. I met students. They took me to their dorms. I got to see a campus. That was amazing. So I made great connections there. And I would spend the evenings just going out and walking around Cambridge and Boston by myself. And then I went out with a few people, and it was really nice at that time. I don't know if you have any more questions around that I can go over. So when I did the erotic modeling, I thought, oh, I can do that as well. I'm trying to reinvent myself. But
I have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The erotic modeling, was that through this institution? Was this like a little more?
It was through, there was a community of artists, and there weren't just students. There were also people who were professionals there. A few, not everyone was a student. So there was a few people who did other things like photography. And I was asked by one of the older drawers, that weren't students, one of the drawers, because there were advanced courses too for drawing. I was asked if I could do, who was great friends with the studio director. I was asked if I could do erotic modeling for his photography. I thought, all right, sure. And I was impressionable, and I thought, that is amazing that someone could see something in me. I mean, when you have low self-esteem, like me, and you don't think of yourself as, or you also come from a repressed background, and you also are, you know, trying to find your way as a young person, you take any attention, really. I mean, I did. I'll speak for myself, I did. And I said, sure. It wasn't like I was sexually motivated, because there wasn't any sexually motivation around it. It was, there was an incentive for money, of course, but there was that element. And I'm not here to tell the story of someone who has probably gone through very hard financial times and has had to put on their high heels and be on the street. There's that part too that I later found out about, but this is my transition into that. And for me, it was just attention, and there was a money incentive, and there was also the reinvention of myself and pushing myself to my limits. When I was asked to do the erotic modeling, I was asked to do it. I thought there were going to be other people. I was asked to do it with just him. And then I was asked to do poses. And after a few sessions, I forget, like maybe 3, after the third session, I was asked to self-stimulate myself and they wanted to capture those acts in motion, in picture motion. And for me, I thought about art. I thought about maybe the daringness again of trying to push myself to limits where are my limits? I thought, all right, yeah, I'll do it. And I did that. I think for the time that the lapse of time that I would do these self-stimulate, at first I thought they were just all part artistically for this job. But when he wanted another model to be a part of it and for both of us to perform, it was when I began getting confused. I remember thinking, wait, I feel it was this line, this blurry line of pornography now. And I wasn't sure, I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to say, wait, hold on, what is this project for? I didn't know how to, it all happened so fast. Just thinking back, I mean, I sent you a picture, Andy, of myself thinking as I'm reflecting, like, how did it just seemed like everything smoothly came into place. And when I look at myself in that picture, maybe you might share it with Jess and Kenny here from your phone. I think to myself how naive I was, so ingenuo. So naive, no? So innocent. And so when another model was asked to perform with me, in the beginning, I think he noticed that I was nervous and that I was beginning to doubt, question. So the sort of poses that we were doing were sort of neutral enough. We're just touching each other, nothing. But then kissing was part of it, and then there was mutually doing something, and then there was another model. It was a female one, and the three of us. And this time, I had two other like people I could talk to, and so when the photographer was not involved, then I would ask, "Oh, how did you get into this?" "Oh, it was from art modeling." And the other gal, I asked too, "How did you? Did you also?" She said, "Well, I do something else on the side." I said, "What do you mean something else on the side?" And she said, "I'll tell you after the session." So from there, I remember I had really liked this gal. I really liked her a lot. She was Brazilian as well, and she was cool, and we hung out. And she is the one who introduced me to erotic massaging. And that's when she just said what she did. And from there, I thought, oh, and you make how much? At that time, $60 for an hour. And with a happy ending, you can do 100. And she's the one who showed me the ropes, so to speak. She's the one who definitely got me in. And she said, there's all this dog background. I'm looking for, Rosemary, ¿podemos cerrar esa ventana? Porfis. No, es que le puso esa cosa. Gracias. Es que esos perrotes. Ay, gracias, Rosemary. So it was she who introduced me, and she talked about it with both of us, the other erotic model, and she said she's looking for boys because some of her clients were looking for men, were looking for young men, and I was hesitant. I think in the beginning I was just sort of amazed that she talked about it so candidly, so like it was nothing, like it was just going to work at like Dunkin' Donuts or something, you know. She just said, I do erotic massage. I'm a masseuse. I do erotic massages, and this is how I do it. And it was so normal. And the other art model was hesitant. We both looked at each other, but he was more braver than I am. So he said, sure, I'll look into what you do. And so I then felt like this is peer pressure. I then felt at that time, I thought, well, if he could do it, maybe I could do it too. And it's just like this just keeps going and going from it was from art modeling to erotic modeling to then erotic massages. And she had this connection with this photographer, and I had learned later on, was one of her clients, one of the people who she massaged for. She was amazingly gorgeous. I loved everything about her, just the way she carried herself, her power, and she would speak Spanish. There's a lot of people from Brazil that I learned that they can speak Spanish so well. And we Spanish speakers don't learn Portuguese. It doesn't, they learn Spanish. And she learned it through watching novelas, soap operas. So I really liked her. And I wanted to have a relationship with her. I remember that. And so I think by impressing her or trying to have this relationship with her, I wanted to prove that I was also as confident and as brave as her. The way she embodied herself, I just admired her so much. So I took up one of her clients one day, and I told her, I don't know how to massage. I don't know how to. She's just like, watch me, and you don't have to say anything. You don't have to be licensed. This is underground. Like, you don't have to do anything. You don't. And so you go to the studio, and this is at the same art studio. You can go there, or they had another massage parlor. And I went there in the back, and people would come like normal. And if you were a client and you requested these things, you were in the sort of hush-hush about it. And we would be there. It was now the three of us who were working there. The other guy, eventually, I don't know what he decided to do. He wasn't around anymore. I stuck around. And I learned the ropes. I learned how to massage. And most people, and you don't really have to learn that much, because most people who were there coming for those kind of sessions were looking for more than a massage. So if it was just tactile touch, that was fine with them. And then it was a happy ending. From there, it went to, so I decided to do this for some time, and I made good money. I was staying at a hotel. I don't know why. That was the stupidest thing I did, because it was so much money to stay in a hotel, but I stayed in a hotel. Yeah.
And just to follow this, is like during that time of the erotic modeling, there was that moment where you kind of were uncomfortable with what was being asked of you, when it was like another person was coming in and you were both supposed to masturbate. But then you kind of passed through that. You got through that discomfort and you went through it. How are you? And then, of course, you go from there to 3 people involved, and these are photographs, not pictures, right? These are photographs. Are you now becoming comfortable? Like, how would you describe what the process as you go from that to then massages to happy endings to what is your experience? You described it as being naive, for not doing that. I'm not sure. Like, I think, but what's going on for you during that transition as you move deeper and deeper into more and more, kind of like what people understand as like the sex work?
Yeah. So I think for me, it was feeling weird with an older man photographing me than with someone around my age teaching me about to do this. There was a huge difference from that. So this creepy person asking me to start doing pornographic scenes with other models, to my peer saying, hey, this is cool. Sort of that shift did something for me. And I did feel uncomfortable when I was with her and we were talking about it and how she talked about sex work. And she said, oh, whatever, it's nothing, I just make this much money. When she would talk about it this way, I felt I could be the same. It was almost mimicking. I was finding my way. I was an awkward Jehovah's Witness kid. I felt like with her, I was finding my way with her, and I was learning how to be like her. It was for sure. All of this was a reaction to the backlash towards my my upbringing was everything that they taught me not to do, I'm going to al carajo, do it, you know? And with her, it was just this, it made it easy to I don't think I registered what I was doing. I think it was more, it made it easy just to do it. It was like going to the club for the first time, you know, or going and drinking for the first time, or smoking a cigarette for the first time, or doing weed for the first time. It felt like that. It was exhilarating. But then when I was alone in these sessions by myself with just the client, I did feel uncomfortable, and I kind of doubted in these moments, what am I doing? What am I, like, touching some person, some 40-year-old, and they're asking me to do this and they're asking me to do that, and then they're asking other things. You know, I remember there were a few clients who would grab me really tightly, and I was skinny. I'm not as skinny as I was, but I was very thin. And although I was a strong person because I rock climbed, and they would grab me and then take me directly to their private area, like even 30 minutes, not even 30 minutes within the session, which is supposed to last for about 60 minutes. I remember just saying, hold on, just hold. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to say, give me a second, or let's transition to that, or don't touch me like that, please. Or if you're too physical this way, we're going to end the session early, or something. I didn't know how to say any of that. And so I was sort of forced sometimes, physically, although it was consensual because I was there, because I also was working, right? I had to finish the job. What later on became difficult was when people were seeking more services, like sex, basically, when they wanted penetration, when they wanted toys to be involved, or when they wanted to take me home, or when they started stalking. When after work they would be around. And this was sort of new to me. And I would ask, what should I name her? Because I don't want to say her name. I'll just say she was Lisa. I'll say Lisa. I would ask Lisa, what do you do? She was so used to this. So she did put her boundaries. But I later found out if they paid her well enough, that she would sleep with some of these people. I don't know if I wanted to go that far. That was for me my no. I just would lie and say, oh, I have a partner, or I have an STI, and that didn't work. And some of these people actually had STIs, and I thought, oh my goodness, I never got one, luckily. But I would do what's digital sex, right? Digital sex is using your hands. So I would do a lot of digital sex. And then when I talked to Lisa about it, she was like, well, it's no biggie if you do something else. You know, if you just do whatever, like if you do some role playing, or if you decide to go home with someone and you give them a peep show, or you do this, you don't have to let them go all the way. And she needed someone else, again, to do an act. And I said, sure, because I liked her. And so I went and I did an act with her, a sexual act, and we got paid both half each. And that's how it started. So from there, I think it was knowing how to do this without feeling so like new. It wasn't new anymore now at this point. I did feel some shame in the fact that my mom would ask me, what are you doing for work? Or how are you surviving? Or do you need money? Or my dad would be wondering if I'm all right. And I would say, oh, I'm working. Don't worry about it. Or I'm fine. When I began to know other sex workers that I got introduced to, there was this competitiveness. I had no idea that people were competitive. And if I charge a certain thing, people would get upset because I didn't know how much to charge. I didn't know how much to charge to go to someone's home and just to self-stimulate myself. I was charging cheap. I thought it was, well, self-stimulating myself, that's normal. I'm 18 years old. I can do that all day. I mean, I think I can. And I charged, what, $50? People were charging $100. And they say, don't charge that much because you're that's not fair on us. So the wages, it was wage competition. It was also vanity, a lot of vanity. I will say, especially around gay guys. I don't like the way that some of the gay sex workers were. And I met trans workers. And there were women. Women always get paid more in this industry than men. That's just the fact. That's what I've always known in doing erotic massages, or if you're doing, they're more requested, or doing prostitution, or if you're just webcamming, women, whatever it is, women are always going to be requested more than men. And the industry is quite high for them. But that comes with a lot of consequence, a lot of things that happen to them. And as a guy, I know that I could get away with things that I'm sure women, some of my coworkers were not, were very afraid of. Some of them were manhandled, grabbed horribly, and things that I did not experience. I experienced some of those things, but to the degree of what they've experienced, and the way they just casually oh, it's nothing, or yeah, it grabbed me too hard by the neck or something, and it was just, I just told them, please stop. It was like, well, you just like that? I would be freaking out. You should not ever let someone do that, But you get involved and you just don't think twice about it when it happens often, too much. And people really did, for money, they would do actual sex work, actual sex work, actual full on prostitution. So there was that. Yeah.
Did you? Well, I'm curious. I guess 2-part question. How you? Because obviously you're coming off, like the Jehovah Witness experience. Growing into yourself, finding out about the world. And yet you still are trying to shed this frame of the world, right? That you were indoctrinated into. So I wonder 2 things. So what were you feeling? Like, did you ever have any feelings of shame or doubts? Like, even though you've already done this a bunch of times. And 2, like, did you talk to other, sex workers about this and how you guys felt about it?
There was shame. There was excitement. There was also this rebellious nature, like I said. But there was this shame. I did feel shame because there were moments that sometimes reminded me of what I was doing was not normal. And when people actually wanted something and I said no, then people would call me a bunch of names and treat me like trash, or treat other coworkers like trash. So I was told many times how fucking ugly I was, or how stupid I was, or what a whore I was, or I'm a little bitch, or whatever, or I was called names, or sometimes I was just told that I was good for nothing but other just to be fucked. I was a hole to be fucked, and that's what I needed to be, and I didn't want to be that. And so I think those were reminders, like thinking, crap, like I am involved in this, am I not? Like, how am I involved? How did I get into this? And I think that you build thick skin over time, and then you also build this reliance on your friends are part of it. I kind of stayed away from other males. Some of them were very hard to find heterosexual for me in my community that I was in the East Coast. Hard to find heterosexual male workers. Mostly they were bi or gay. For females, women, I got closer to them. But they were also jaded in many ways. Some of them were doing drugs. We're all kind of young here. We were amongst our type community there in the studio, where we were at the massage parlor, where now we were being solicited for sex or for acts or for other kind of modeling. We were like, they weren't hiring at this parlor. They were not hiring older folks. So I didn't get a chance to have some mentorship or some sort of guidance from other people who probably were been in this industry or done this work in this field for a while. And so we were all kind of learning from each other. I think we were growing up with each other. I know that I had certain values, and I would tell them, like, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't allow to do that. I was being kind of brotherly to some people, but overall, I think talking about our feelings was too hard. There were some people who had run away from home. Other people were students that dropped out. Others were sort of finding their way, and they lived in Boston. I love their accent in Boston, very strong, like a very strong Massachusetts East Coast accent, and I love the way they were. They just like their sort of careless attitude. I didn't find, there were not other Latinos. I didn't have any Latino. I mean, Brazilians are Latino, but I didn't consider them to, like, they didn't speak Spanish with me. But other Latinos, Spanish speaking, I was the only one. What else? I mean, the shame that I felt was somehow, I did cry a lot in the sense that I felt lost. I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't know where I was going. And that was more overpowering than shame of what I was doing, because no one knew me here. Who would I be shamed in front of? And God was dying in my head. I was losing God. So who did I have to be accountable to? So shame was slowly dying away from what I was feeling was loss. I felt like this existential thoughts of what is next for me. I felt trapped. I didn't know, okay, are you going to school or you're not going to school? Are you going to study? Are you going to work? Or like, you can't not do this forever. And I didn't know how to move past that. And I just drew and wrote a lot. So I have my journals, which are in San Francisco, and a few of them are in Mexico. And I had recordings, some video recordings, but those were not like sexual recordings. Those were just fun recordings of going out. But I would spend time by myself. I remember walking in Boston. I have pictures, just walking and taking the I don't know if they call it the metro, but the tube. I forget what they call it now. But I would just walk. I would just walk a lot and deal with my sadness. And especially when you're in autumn, the way that everything looks, and then your feelings, and then your work, just didn't feel. Everything was just feeling horrible. I remember feeling just, oh, it's so sad. No purpose in life. I have no God. I have no direction. I don't have a religion that guided me. That was my compass for 18 years of my life. Now what do? I have nothing. I felt like Siddhartha. I also read the book at that time. I felt like, Herman Hesse's book. I read that book at the time. I don't know if you'll like, that's probably like high school literature. And I just didn't know if I should, where should I go in this place? So I don't know. I feel like my story is quite boring. I don't think there's anything interesting about it. I'm thinking to myself, why are people messaging me when this is the most, I want to talk about what's happening here in Colombia and politics, but people are asking about my life.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the kind of the bridge. Like, I'm curious to know if we see like similarities, in the stories of people you talk to, and because you talked about, like, in the last episode, you talked about some sort of like mentorship that you provided to certain people, at least like with the warnings, right, of some of the perils of engaging in these activities for survival, right? And so, I guess if there is a bridge, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Andy.
Well, mine was still a question of the kind of work you were in at that time, which is, if I understand right, then most of your people who are your clients or people who you're doing this stuff with, they're much older than you.
Mostly.
And
yeah.
Are you tending to see like just an array of different folks come in? Are there regulars? How does that work?
Okay.
And then I think you should go to Kenny's thing.
Yes, then I'll go to, so that's a good question. So
and then Jessica.
Well, you can answer that, but I just had one more question I think that would make sense before you pivot to Colombia.
Sure.
Or go ahead and do anything.
So I want to state that first, I should say sex work covers anything from traditional sex work, that is prostitution, to anything technological to this day where people are now doing virtual. It can cover anything from like I said, being in a corner. That's what most people think of when they think of sex work. It could be pornography. It could be, you know, what I also did later on, which was sexual surrogate, you're a sex surrogate, when you work with people with disabilities. It could be anywhere from sex therapy, and you could also be just another erotic model. And you could also provide, let's see, what else? There's also BDSM. People also dominatrix, which I dabbled into. I wasn't very good at that, but I just wanted to see those experiences. And so it's a whole array of things. And so anywhere from that, people often ask me, so did you actually go and let people penetrate you? And I say, well, that is one form of sex work, but there's all these other forms. You don't have to just do that. I've done some virtual, but not like online streaming services. I've done it with people who are far away, who've liked me and kept me as their model, and they want to keep having that relationship with me. The services I have provided have been erotic massaging, have been erotic modeling, have been peep shows, I've worked in the USA, started, then in Mexico, and in the UK. I've worked in France, and I did it for some time when I was traveling abroad, and when I was also living in the UK for some time, because I didn't have any way to make a good living, other than I didn't have any papers at the time. So I found this work when I was working in the music festival scene. I worked in Bristol. And so maybe just, you might know some of these places, Bristol and Cornwall, and I worked in London, and I worked in Leeds, and I worked in Birmingham up in the UK, and in Scotland, and in Edinburgh. And so they were good jobs that I got paid for. And so the actual service I think that has been most requested of me has been being of awakening and exploring a sexual side of themselves that they weren't able to explore before. In San Francisco, I worked with primarily gay men who are older, who are no longer have partners or are able to have sexual experiences, but they would rather have an escort and pay someone. There are lots of people who pay for that. I worked in Pacific Heights with women who were never able to have an orgasm, and they had been married for a long time. And so I gave erotic massages there through word of mouth. And I had a kid at the time, so I had to pay bills. And, working as an educator in San Francisco, I didn't get paid as much, especially not when you are, site support, such as me, as I was a para interpreter, and even teachers don't get paid that much. So how was I supposed to pay the bills of my kid? And I'll name him Carlitos. I didn't have a way to pay for a lot of the things that I had to take him to abroad. I had private school and summer camps, and he wanted braces, and so I had to get him braces, and so I knew that when I was younger, when I was 25, 26, I knew when I was younger I had done this work before. So I just decided the people who wanted me again, who had been in my contact list, I decided to contact them back and said, look, if you're looking for anyone, I'm around. And most of the work that I found later on, because I left the East Coast, was through Craigslist and Backpage, which got shut down. So when these things got shut down, I wasn't able to find much. I had ceased working by the time 2016 happened. In the UK, it was easier because in the music festival scenes, especially in some of the festivals, they were quite liberal about these topics. And so I would just hand out my number and say, well, I work as a worker, and this is what I do. This is my specialty. I provide, for women especially, I would provide a way to achieve orgasms. It's not guaranteed, but it's a development to that stage. And for men, if they erectile dysfunction disorder, or for people who had traumatic experiences. I wouldn't say I was a sex therapist because I never could claim that, but I just say, I reached with people the level of comfort that people can feel secure and safe with me in their bodies and explore. Most of the people that I've worked with were heterosexual men, and because on the down low, they were many times on the down low, especially in Mexico, and women. But they always say, like, it's interesting because in Mexico we do have a sex industry, but it's one of the top, not the top of Latin America, but it is there. It's subtle. It's very subtle, and it's mostly, I've noticed, women, which don't get talked about a lot. It's sort of romantic getaways that they'll call it. Whereas if you are a guy, it's like sex tourism, right? It's so harsh and so. But for women, there are in Cancun and you find in Puerto Vallarta, they will hire Mexican boys, or that people work like in Cihuatanejo. There were many of those that would come. And I would be amazed at how much is not talked about women who actually do find, in Mexico, I've seen it, find romantic getaways where they're paying boys here, right? Like I'm talking about 18-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds. And so I learned about that, and I felt comfortable enough to explore those areas. And in Santa Cruz, there is a community of people who are, I got to know when I came back to the West Coast, of people who were trying to help women achieve orgasms, because again, the men have refractory periods, and sometimes men in relationships with women don't provide sexual gratification. It's just a fact in many relationships. And so there was, in Santa Cruz, very open-minded liberal community. There were people talking in sex workshops about how to achieve that, women leading other women, and also men who were interested in working as sex masseuses with happy endings for women. And so I got connected to that, and then word of mouth. And so I worked in Pacific Heights in San Francisco, where people were requesting that. And I want to state that sex is actually something very good. I think that I'm very sex positive. Where I think it gets tricky is when you start getting into, like, I have people who I know that work in the porn industry where they get abused and exploited for and wage theft. And then there are people who definitely get sex trafficked. There's that dark side, of course. But shutting down Backpage and shutting down Craigslist, all of that made us go into the underground, into figuring out how we were going to. I mean, I understand there was sex trafficking going on, even child abuse going on, but I had always been of the mind that you can actually use Backpage and Craigslist to find those criminals instead of shutting the whole thing down. It was part of Kamala Harris's effort to win her senatorship back in, when was it? I forget now the year, 2000 something, 2016, 2015, I forget. But she was a attorney general, and she said, well, this is a sex trafficking site, and they raided the CEO of Backpage and all of that. You can find online articles around that. But for the rest of us who were working in the underground, we were using those sites. I was using those sites. Go ahead, Kenny.
Oh, yeah. Jessica had a question though too, though. So
just about Backpages and like the persecution that's happening in San Francisco, because in the process of gentrifying the city, they've tried to clean up, quote unquote, certain areas like the Cap right in San Francisco. And like one thing that I guess people who are aware of the sex industry here is that when Backpages and Craigslist is shut down, people have to, like people who would get sex work through those pages would have to go to the street. Not everyone. And so they are more in danger in certain ways. So that's one critique of these, clamping down and censorship, essentially. That happens all the time here. And I know that because my partner, she works with people who have been sex trafficked and blah, blah, blah. And yet that is a very normal thing to do, like to support this. In the name of protecting women, they persecute and put a lot of people in peril because they take away their self-determination, whatever degree there is, through those pages.
Mm-hmm. From there, I decided, I went back to San Francisco, that's for sure. And then I flew back and I said, I'm going to do something else. But I didn't know how to. I mean, I think the mindset that knowing how much money you can make so easily, quick, and how used to you were, I think that I decided to look at Craigslist for those classified sections for people seeking sexual services. And when I looked at it, I thought, oh, I can do that. That's something I already did, or that's something I can try out, or it wouldn't be so bad since I'm in San Francisco. It's not that bad because it's something I already had experienced. And that's what happened. Yeah.
Question about those Craigslist ads, like, was there like a code that that you could decipher? Or was it just blatant, like out there? Like, I don't know.
No, if you look, well, at least at the time, I don't know how it was, if they're putting up like restrictions or whatever later. But for me, it was just going to the part where it said, I think it was sexual encounters or missed encounters. I forget now, something like that. There was a small section. And then there's men for men, women for women. And then there are erotic services. And then you look at the classifieds, and then they're dated. And then you can see, and I would just email, and I would just, this is the way you would do things. And I don't know why people think that you can't find people if Craigslist, and because now people use Facebook for it. And I know people here in Colombia who have found other people through Facebook. It's not, you don't need a Craigslist. Here they wouldn't use Craigslist. It's all through Facebook. I know one of the sex workers here who was 13 years old, who was contacted by someone in another country at 13 or 12 or 13, and flew all the way out here just to have sex with them. So it can happen. Now this person, I should state, if we're going to add this story, that I should state this person is now 22 years old. But to me, it's amazing how connected you can be. I think if you're going to take down Backpage, you should take down Facebook. Basically. In the beginning, when I first went to the East Coast, I knew somebody. And then I didn't talk to that person. And so I stayed in benches or in churches where I remember I could stay in, where they were giving charity work, or they gave people, I didn't want to stay in a homeless shelter. So I paid hotels, and those were expensive. And I would go eat out a lot. And so with this money, you felt very comfortable. And I didn't gain weight like I do now, so I would eat a lot. So I ate a lot, a lot of food. And it felt good to have this money. And then I would go outside of Boston area to other places like Salem and explore New Hampshire and explore other places in the East Coast, which are really cool. You know, you have these beautiful states nearby, and you'd go to New York, and it's so easy. Just, it's everything in that. New England is so, that part of the USA is so special to me, because I remember just taking these trips with the money that I made. So I didn't really save any money, if you're again, to answer your question. So the money that I made was good, but the money that I also made was something I used from my travels to get to know New England, you know, and to be in the harbors, and just the seas that I love. The East Coast, that to me is one most wonderful memories I had. And then going to Pennsylvania and going down, I felt guilty going to New York because I stayed away, because the headquarters of the Jehovah's Witnesses were in New York. So I felt if I went to New York, I'd be betraying my own faith. So I just avoided New York.
Well, so if I understand right, then we're talking about why the story started at the age of 18. You've been spanning space that continues for over a decade, basically, right? Like in terms of involvement in this industry, correct?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Reflecting back on that experience, because I do want to then connect it to what you're doing in Colombia,
Yeah,
and things like that. But
yeah.
Even before you do that, what do you? Because you were attempting to rebel, right? Forget you, Jehovah's Witness. I'll decide myself. And reflecting back on this long experience in this area and in this industry,
Yeah.
What would you say are positive that came out of it, and what do you feel like are the things that have been the price you paid?
Well, positive in the price I paid. how about this is where I'm beginning to feel at this point judged by the viewers, and I'm beginning to feel like I want to shut down this entire episode. So how about we watch that video that I told you, if you can just play it for us, because I think I'm beginning to feel very judged, even though it's just the three of you. But I need to remember that, you know, we live in such a hypocritical world. The people who are probably going to see this and are going to judge me on these taboo subjects. I just want to say, for anyone, this is why I think sexuality is so complicated, because most of the people I've encountered were from anywhere from straight to older women to lesbians or whatever. And I've had more people come to me later on who were on the down low, trying to experience their first experience with someone who is safe enough to be with, like me as a man, or with women who have struggled with their sexuality because they were repressed as well. So I just don't, and people who are going to sit there and judge me and look at me or judge anyone who is in this industry, in this field, I'm sure a majority of them have already watched porn. They've already seen enough, and they've enjoyed themselves watching workers, but they judge, and they're really Christian, and they're really Mormon, or whatever they want to be. But so I feel like there's this hypocriticalness in society judging this field of work. Why don't we play that video, Andy? Because I'll answer your question. Answer your question.
And this is a video that you sent me, and it was made in Colombia, correct? No.
This is a Spanish video.
Okay.
And this is for the Barcelona's Erotic Festival. And this woman here, she's a porn actress. She's a porn star. And she says some pretty powerful things in this video. And this video was made in 2016. It's called Homeland or Patria. And it's in Spanish, but it has English subtitles. And it's about just in her country, but really in society, anywhere you can apply to, how much there is this disingenuous attitude of people who judge. So maybe we'll just watch it. My name is Amarna Miller. I'm a porn star, and I was born in a hypocritical country where the same people calling me a whore jerk off watching my videos. A country that loves life, but allows killing in the name of art. A country outraged at corruption that still votes for thieves. Where they save the same banks that evict thousands of families. A country that says it is secular while decorating the Virgin Mary. That treats migrants as heroes and immigrants like trash. A country where those who are supposed to be moral guardians can be the most dangerous. Where prostitution is still not legal, but where the number of clients grow every year. A country that is supposed to be open and tolerant, where a referee receives death threats for being gay. Yes, we live in a disgustingly hypocritical country, but some of us do not give up. But I don't know if anyone wants to make a comment to that. I'll just say it's caused a lot of controversy, made waves, and it's something that I often think about when people. I'm now in my 30s, and I'm still trying to come to terms with some of this stuff. I've only shared this really with my partner, and then I started taking I started doing therapy with a Mexican psychiatrist, really wonderful therapist, and through those conversations with my partner, with conversations with my therapist, I've able to sort of come out and share some of this past of mine. And then I talk about it, and then suddenly I'm told, what? You did that? Why would you do that? Or how could you ever get to that place? Or wait a minute, you did what? You were a whore, or you were So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's difficult to talk about something like this, so personable. And I know people who are in this field and feel the same way. And so it's challenging. And I don't know if you all want to say about anything before I answer your question. So.
Well, I guess I would, because we've been doing many episodes together, and this is a big jump to some of the stuff you shared before, to sharing something that is very personal. So I guess I would want to know if you're okay with, like, at least for me, you know, like, or Kenny or Jessica, has it been okay to share with us?
With the three of you, it's all right. I feel very comfortable sharing with the three of you. But this is going on, the cloud of the internet forever and ever. So, so I'm stumbling around it.
No, I feel like you've done a comprehensive and excellent job giving a context to it. You know, because personally, I would say anybody, I know you, but I think anybody who's been following the show, I feel like you've given them everything to understand, to walk us through how a person kind of goes there, and things that I wouldn't have necessarily known. How does a person go from here and get to there? But I think you've helped me understand that it's just a road. You know, if you start walking
you don't
down
just
it,
wake up one day and decide to work in this.
But so I mean, for me, I do connect it to I do connect it to an abusive experience in Jehovah's Witness. I do connect, and I associate abuse with the erosion of boundaries. You know, like, and that's usually people who are recovering from abuse have to learn how to build boundaries for themselves. And that is the common maybe thread that I hear, is maybe in an industry that's not going to teach you, doesn't necessarily, well, they did partly teach you where you could say no, but if you've had that experience where you've been abused and your boundaries have been taken down hard, this would be an area where that could be taken advantage of, where you feel you do not feel empowered to put those boundaries back up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I can say.
I you know, like you said, Lips, I like the way you put it. This is a road, right? Because in some ways I identify with Eduardo. You know, when I was in college and I was young and I don't know where the fuck I was going, and I also wrote Bart when I was at UC Berkeley and was suicidal. You know, I was trying to grab my way, and I didn't feel like I had anybody to talk to. You know, and I was a disappointment to my family because I didn't do what they expected, and not just my family, but all the people that invested time in me. You know, because I was this exceptional student. So I don't want to make this story about me, you know, but I do identify, you know, in some ways. I also identify with the level of shame because, you know, maybe some other episode we'll talk about my growing up within the context of the sex work. You know, that's something that Eduardo, when we first had this conversation, was kind of surprised to, that, you know, like sort of my story, right? That in, you know, how, like, that's why my perceptions on sex and morality are so different than a lot of people, because my upbringing was around sex work. A lot of the kids I grew up with were, you know, kids whose mothers were sex workers, and my mother provided, you know, a space for them to work safely. So condoms, all that was normal. But I do know that the shame, you know, of talking about your story with relation to sex work, you know, because that's how we my family survived. Not that my mother was doing sex work, but she was running a place where sex work was happening, you know, and we couldn't talk about that. And even when I wrote my story for college, you know, that part wasn't included because I was so ashamed. The part that was included to make it to college, right, for supposedly to advance, was about me being an quote unquote at-risk student in San Francisco in the Mission District as a Latino man. Never mind that story, you know, and because again, it does carry a lot of weight. And so this video that you just showed brings a lot, you know, and like from me, because even in one of my relationships, I'm not gonna name names, but I had an open relationship. And San Francisco, a supposedly very liberal, you know, city that's supposed to be sex positive and shit, there was so much judgment, no questions, no. And same living in another country, you know, people finding out that I had an open relationship, judging and, you know, immediately saying why, you know, and but at the same time, at the time, I remember the answer being, this is hypocritical because a lot of your parents are in open relationships. They just don't talk about it. You know, and it's very likely that your dad is fucking around. You know, a lot of women fuck around, but they don't say it. You know, they're more discreet about it. This shit happens all the time. It just doesn't get talked about. You know, so there's a lot of hypocrisy in terms of, you know, so I do see that, right? Like and I guess to kind of wrap it up a little bit, I do appreciate you sharing that story. You know, because it does, I imagine, takes a lot. You know, it's a very vulnerable thing to do, but you know, I personally, I see it just as another story, you know, because of the many that I've heard, you know, and people trying to make it and survive and find their way.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, this has been a really interesting episode. I mean, like both Andy and Kenny said, I think it's pretty courageous to share this much, Eduardo. And so yeah, I appreciate you putting yourself out there like that. I think in terms of like the stigma thing, you know, I mean, I have my own opinions and stuff on this, on the whole sex work industry, and this has particularly been an interesting conversation just because I feel like most, if not every perspective I've heard, like personal perspective I've heard on the sex industry has been like through the lens of women. And so it's really interesting to hear a man's experience. And I feel like I'm gonna have to just kind of sit with it for a while. And I hope we have more conversations because I mean, just in terms of, like you did an amazing job of kind of like laying out your whole story, but I feel like we would need like several more hours to even just like for you, Eduardo, to like reflect on it or analyze it, let alone for the three of us to like jump in and, you know, connect it to our stances and our politics and our experiences and all of that. But I just wanted to add, in terms of the stigma thing and like the video that we just played, I think there's a weird, like, just in terms of the culture and discourse around this industry, like there's on one end of the spectrum, people who totally demonize it, but demonize like the wrong people. Like they're putting the stigma on you, putting the stigma on prostituted women or even trafficked, right? Like putting the stigma on like workers, I guess, if we want to use the sort of Marxist framing, as opposed to like the industry part of it, right? And when we talk about, when we get to like sex industry, global South versus global North, and like what are the differences and stuff, like, I mean, this goes all the way up to like the World Bank and the IMF, right? And the sex industry is huge in terms of like, economies and GDP. And so like the exploitation is coming from like the most powerful centers of power at every level of hierarchy, like both class hierarchy, race, sex as in like gender sex, all of it, right? So yeah, I mean, and the video did a good job, I think, of kind of spotlighting that hypocrisy. But then I think there's also the other end of the spectrum with this sort of postmodern like sex positivity and like sex work is sick, sex work is work, like that whole like neoliberal mantra, which in my opinion tends to, and we don't really have to like get all into this in this episode, but I think it does the opposite of like almost like covering over those power relations, right? And I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to hear, Eduardo, like your thought on even just like that term of like sex work as work, and like, is it like, yes, of course, there's huge overlap in terms of just like workers at large and the challenges and like circumstantial restrictions of our life. Like, of course you felt trapped, right? Like probably all four of us feel or have felt trapped in our jobs at some point. But I don't think sex work is just like any other job. And I think that some of the, especially like the sort of leftist discourse right now, and and a lot of it, like especially on the grassroots level, I think is coming from a good place of like wanting to get rid of that stigma and wanting to like support workers. But in the process, I feel like the mainstream left has just arrived at a totally like uncritical stance on what is like at large an extremely violent and exploitative industry, right? Not saying every person who's involved in it is you know, some sort of like monster, right? Like again, you're putting stigma on the wrong group of people. I don't know. Is that making sense?
Yeah. So I feel for me, the percentage of us that have survived and been have more control over our own work, right? And are just it's a very small percentage. It's here in other countries, where I'm in Mexico and here in Colombia, where I have realized that level of control that I try to share isn't, the concept is not there, because I need to work. What are you talking about saying no to someone that is going to pay me a very good price when I need to pay all these bills? I need to do these things, and I'm trying to communicate. You are in control, and you have to say, this is not okay. These are what my boundaries are. Like I have learned over time, I can only speak like that because I have other income. Like I've worked so many other ways, right? I was an educator. I was a tutor. I was a waiter. I worked as a translator. I've worked as an interpreter. I've worked, like, there are other ways I've learned over the years, since I was 18, that I've learned how to do other work. But if you are in a country where you are limited with your opportunities, your level of saying no isn't the same level as me saying no. I've learned that here more than anything, even talking about with people here, especially with women. There isn't that same understanding, I realized. This is something I've come across. So I feel that sometimes the Western way of thinking, or the neoliberalist way of thinking that you're talking about, Jessica, about sex work is just work, it's empowerment, it's my body, my choice, and all of this way of thinking is wonderful if you can get to that space and if you can be in control. But that's not how it happens. There's exploitation that happens. People are trafficked. People are, and and like I said, my experience in the East Coast, that it wasn't like your stereotypical pimping out people, right? But it was, you are trapped in a world sometimes where you feel like these are your community, these are your spaces, these are your people, and you don't have nothing else. You don't have anything else. And then there's the other private stuff that happens that I know has happened to me and has happened to other colleagues of mine, where I remember being in Bristol and being held hostage. And I was in the UK and I had to work. I didn't have any money, and I had I had a kid with me at that time, and we had to go to Bristol. And on the way there, I remember having a client from a music festival, and I charged something, and they said, "Well, you didn't give me a full-on experience." And I said, "What was that experience? What did I just do? I mean, I gave you a happy ending, I gave you a massage, everything." And they were giving me, they gave me £50. They said, "But you didn't give me something else, and I wanted like to have sex." That's what I thought this was about. I thought it was insinuated. And I thought, no, like I'm very clear with what's going to happen. And, close the door, strong, burly Brit. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get out? And that happens. And holding me hard, again, another person, everyone just thinks, just hold someone. Like you can just, we're all just, we're just objects. You can just hold. And looking at me directly in my eyes, you're going to stay here until you get fucked. And I remember I'll call my kid Carlitos, was downstairs. This was at an apartment building. I thought to myself, what if I get in trouble for doing, like if I didn't even have a phone. What if I get in trouble for asking or calling the cops to do something about this? Or what if he actually does rape me? Or what if he hits me and I fight back? I'm probably not going to get raped, but I'm going to get hit really hard. I don't know how I'm going to get out of the situation. And he's holding me hostage. Like the door, he's putting locks on it. All I remember saying is like, if you do anything to me, someone's downstairs waiting. I'm thinking, what's he going to do? But there were moments like that. And another time as well in Vallejo, and he catfished me and I needed to pay. Private school was coming up. The bill was coming up and I had to go to Vallejo. I took my car. I left my belongings in the car and I went up to their house. He was not the person I thought. I tried to talk smoothly. I said, look, okay, what do you want? Like, okay, we made the deal in the living room. Like, okay, this is what you want, your experience. He was on the down low. And I went to his room. And by that time, he wanted something else. And he pressed his body against me. And he had smelled like smoke, like cigarettes and whiskey. And I really wanted to leave at that point because I knew something was not right. So you can feel when you do something like this, you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he did not let me go. He did not let me leave. Another person held me hostage. And I imagine how many people go through this. This is not, if I who have escaped and have had nothing like this, have had experiences like these. I wonder how many people have been raped, how many people have been exploited, how many people were locked up in a car, locked up in a home, or locked up in a basement. Sometimes like that's kind of a film scene, but those things do happen. I luckily did not go through those things. People did abuse certain things, like they one person in particular wanted to stick his fingers in my mouth, and people have fetishes, and he grabbed me really hard, and I remember pulling me and holding my head, and he taking out his dick and wanting to add. I said no, and there were people like that, and luckily I pushed back, and I just said that's not what we had said. And he was an older person, and he kind of laughed it off. He wasn't as strong, but there were moments like these moments where I think back at how many people put themselves at risks in situations like these. In France, I went up to meet someone. I told them specifically we were just going to be in the nude. We were going to watch porn together. That's what the deal was. They wanted to mutually self-stimulate each other. Us. All right, fine. How much was the pay? 100 euros. Good. I could use that for the rest of the week. No? And it turned out he was doing something else in the bathroom, something completely disgusting, and wanted to play in the bathroom with his feces. And I was not going to do something like that. And so when I wanted to leave, he said, no, this is what I contracted you for. And people think that you're just going to do some service, like you're just there and they own you because they're paying you. And I don't need your money. But how many people are not, they don't have and then my French, I'm yelling at him. I remember yelling at him in French and telling him I just don't want to do this. This isn't what we signed up for. And pretending like he didn't understand my French, whatever. So what about the women or the men who can't leave, who can't get away, who are not able to escape these situations, right? If this happened to me, that's why I think there are people, and here also like the webcamming services with not maybe the users on the other side of the platform, but the monitors who are controlling, who tell you have to stay in the studio, like the webcamming studios here in Bogota. You work a 12-hour shift and you sleep at the studio, and then you wake up to do the work, to work. Like you work, you sleep, you work, you sleep, and that's all your life. And if you don't have a place to sleep, that's where and you're coming from another province around the capital, you stay here and you stay at the studio, and you're overworked, and you're told to do some crazy things like vomit on yourself, or to spit in a cup and then spill it over you. Or, I'm trying to describe some of these things, and I know that I've kind of danced around it a little bit because it is kind of gross. These are kind of explicit things, but I think it's important for people to know that it's not, these things aren't just like, you just make money and then it's easy. Like, people do ask for very weird, awful things. A lot of role playing. I would say 98% of what happens in this field is exploitative and also necessary to do because of the capitalist system that we live in, right? It's a competitive system, and we have to have the economy drives it in many places, and that's most people's incentive for why they do it, right? Very few people get like porn stars and actual escorts. That the percentage of them getting paid a lot, that's a small percentage of people, and they say online on YouTube or whatever you can find it, oh, you get paid a lot of money. I'll say for porn stars that I've spoken to, you don't get paid a lot of money. You don't. I know that for the work they've done, they don't get paid a lot of money. I know that I sometimes say that, well, I got paid this much, from anywhere from $60 to $200. Sure, but how many clients a week? And in those that I'm in control with, right? Like, if you only get one client a week or 2 clients a week, what do I want to do? If I want to make more money, well, I'm just gonna have to do more people. I'm gonna experience more risks if I want if I want to get paid more. But even then, you have your bills and stuff. You have to. It's very expensive. So I have issue. I take issue with people's my choice, my body, kind of like, there is this empowerment piece I respect. I have a part of it, some elements of it in my life. But talking to other workers, I don't, and also just studying about it, reading about it, right, and talking one-on-one with other people, I don't feel it's that concept, that framework isn't always present for the majority of people in this field.
I just wanted to add, I think, like, I think people don't want to cast, like, they don't want to cast sex workers as like lacking in agency, right? Because it's like dehumanizing, right? To like just like, oh, that person's a victim, right? And they are just a passive victim. And I understand, I think, where that thinking comes from. But one of the things that I think I kind of learned this from reading Sheila Jeffries a few years back, is like that idea that you can have agency, but also be extremely oppressed. And I mean, like those two things can both be true at once, right? And that we oftentimes as workers, or especially in this particular industry, right, like, people exercise agency in order to survive the power, like, relations and oppressive circumstances within which they are existing through usually no fault of their own. But I think where I lose it is like, you can't call that freedom, right? Like, you can't call that like a my body, my choice. Like, it's not, choices happen within material conditions of our lives. Anyone else want to comment on that? Maybe. I thank you, Jess, because I there's elements I think I agree with in what you're saying.
I think I agree with you, Jessica. Like, I'm very suspicious too of like these generic statements, right? Like, that are, for me, read like a liberal gospel in some ways, that don't fully understand the nuances, doesn't even care to, right? For example, again, something controversial, this over, the whole liberal gospel over body weight, same thing, like, I'm not judging, people that have bigger bodies, right? But let's recognize that there are problems brought to us, as a result of the system that we live in, that, we don't live healthy lives, we have very limited choices, in most people, the great majority, the masses. And I think this is where this falls, because to me, this is not that different than someone who hustles drugs in a way, like who might be, at risk of getting shot or, having a short lifespan. Because to some people get it. Like, at least that's just the conclusion I've reached at this point of my life, that some people know that, should I go to McDonald's and earn $16, and be humiliated too? Because that's a different level of humiliation, or subjection to limitations. Or, I can make quicker money, and buy things and do things, and so gain some degree of freedom in that sense. And so I think that the sex work question gets a little more sensitive because of taboos and moralizing. But in some ways, I don't see that different than other situations that people find themselves into. Because again, some people just get it. Like, I'm not saying that I'm gonna go sling drugs on the road, but the fuckers who run drugs, they know that, they're trying to cheat the system. They're trying to operate outside of the system of normalcy, right? That you go to school, you get a job, you get wages, and this and that. And so, I see what you're saying. It is complicated. It's both. But at the same time, I still bring it back to the fucking fundamental thing, because I about safety, right? And self-determination, shit that is taken away from us by participating in this system. My partner, she works with people who have been sex trafficked. I've heard horrific stories that will turn your stomach. And the people who perpetrate this violence are not just one type. It's all sorts of people. People in suits, people in fucking cop uniforms, people, very rich people, poor people, sons and mothers. There's all this horrific shit that she has to deal with. And my partner's job is to provide housing for these people. And she works in a nonprofit industrial bullshit. And she knows that she's gotten tired of it, because everything is built to not provide full, long-lasting shelter for people, right? And for me, a lot of this stuff starts from the very fundamentals, building blocks of life, which is, food, housing, safety, and all those things that compound to give us opportunities to actually have some sort of degree of freedom. But we are subjected to these market systems in so many ways. And people try different ways to survive in this, in this system. And so, to me, it's not that different. It's not. We're all caught in this shit, and pile, and there is moralizing sometimes within the same sex industry. There's people who look down on people who walk the street. There's people who look down on escorts and they point balls at each other. But everyone's trying to survive. And so, and again, some people just find a way to do it outside of just fucking going to work. Every day, driving to work every fucking day. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have perils, but I think there is a cost to everyone in some way, in the way we live. And so, like there are, these extreme cases, and I'm not saying that they don't happen. I'm not saying that they happen all the time, but there are extreme cases in every fucking situation, and at the end of the day, to me, this is another reason why I'm like so adamant about fucking overthrowing this fucking system, because it puts people in vulnerable situations, and then coming out of those vulnerable situations, some people make it through, fine, in relative, some people are trapped there for life. So that's why I'm not a participant of a particular fucking policy. This and that. Let's fucking overthrow the market system of housing. Like if you're serious about fixing some of this shit, that's why I call myself a revolutionary socialist, because I don't give a shit. I'm not gonna place judgment, like people what they have to do to survive. Even the fucking people who work for Uber, like corporate Uber or corporations, people who get jobs, people who work at fucking Amazon. That's why I hate the liberal fucking gospel, because it moralizes things, into, you're making this bad choice. This is no. Are you serious about it? Let's fucking overthrow this system. We're gonna have to do what the people in Sri Lanka did. Occupy a fucking houses of power, to get what we want, occupy the houses that we need for our survival, take over the lands that we need for our survival, for life, and so it's still all tied together to me, and so that's why I don't try to moralize things, because people do what they have to do, and then we're also pinned against each other, in the process, and we all pay a price in some way.
Do you think, though, well, actually, maybe I'll direct this at Eduardo. Like, do you think there's something distinct, though, about like specifically sexual trauma and sexual exploitation? Because I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Kenny, but I also think that it is in some ways distinct, I think. And I'm not sure I have the words to articulate quite why, so I'm just going to ask Eduardo what you think.
Are you asking about, is there like a link to...
No, I'm asking, like, I think that there, like, yes, there's exploitation happening in every area of capitalism. And yes, I agree with like the call to action that I 100%. But I'm not sure that I agree that it's like, well, I don't know if this is what you were arguing, but I don't think that specifically sexual exploitation can be kind of like put on the same level as like other types of, I'm mostly thinking about like other types of ways that like labor is stolen, like the McDonald's example, or like yeah, I see the parallel in terms of like humiliation and shame, robbing people of their labor, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's something distinct, especially about like trauma.
I will say the majority of people, maybe, and then Kenny can answer that question too. I mean, I will say the majority of people who I've encountered have had the majority, I'm not saying everyone has been abused. I will say I have been abused. Andy knows that I have been abused as a kid. And so to get to this level, I think there are layers, right? There was a layer of being rebellious, but there's also the layer of, well, I've been here before, but in a different way. And I asked other people what drove you, or what gave you and other people have been abused as well. They have also had sexual abuse, or maybe not sexual, but it would be really domestic abuse, like verbal abuse by their families or other uncles or people like within their community, that have made it easier for them to know that they can do this again. If I'm being clear, this is not everyone's experience, but this is the majority of people I've spoken to. Unlike, I don't know how, if you were to be a McDonald's worker, what experience from your past, traumatic experience, led you to be a McDonald's worker? Maybe there could be an argument that you probably you've always been in a beehive of society, so you just know how to be under someone, right? But as far as like emotional trauma, most people who have been in this field have had some level of trauma. I'm not sure that answers anything, but anyone else can answer.
I mean, partly my thought is, I feel like I agree with what Jessica said early on, that now we've entered into a new part of a conversation that in some ways I don't want to lose track of the story that you shared, and kind of coming back, at the very least asking you to reflect on, okay, that's a journey you've been on. Where has it brought you to now to be able to talk about that? Because I do want to bring up, because I think there's been so much told in that story. I don't think we've had time, and I would suspect that maybe we could do another episode, maybe the next episode, to talk more about this debate that Jessica's opened up.
Yeah, month-long series, Eduardo.
Yeah, that I'm really on the fence. I go back and forth between Kenny and Jessica on this. I think I lean towards the way Kenny's talking about it, but I understand what she's saying. There's something distinctive about the nature of this exploitation that's different. It's bad. They're all bad, but is there something unique, not just in its character, but in the nature of it, that is in the type of damage it does, and in the horror of it in some ways. And so I would like more time to kind of like go into that a little bit, because I think there's so much more to talk about capitalism and like it just brings up the characters like Jeffrey Epstein, like all and those sorts of things, and all these things start to come in, and how I don't know. So I don't want to go. I'd like to actually stay with you, Eduardo, and maybe think that we're going to go to round 3. You know, I'm fine because I also think there's a whole area to get into about virtual sex.
I want to get to that too.
We will, but I don't think we're going to get to it next week.
Oh, we're not.
I don't think so, because I'd like to talk about this, but I want to think about it.
All right. Well, I personally do think there's something distinct about this field. Personally, I do think that there's something very distinct. There's something ingrained, something traumatic. When I speak to the people here who are 18, 19, 20 years old, 21 years old even, I could see myself reflected in them, and I ask them deeper questions, and I see how one thing has led to another. On their side, I will say distinctly is that there is a conversation around when I talk about consent and when I talk about saying no to certain things, they get it, but there's also, what do you do when you say no to everyone? Like, what do you do when you say, no, I don't want to do it? Because a lot of people ask you for a lot of things. You know, they ask you for a lot of fetish stuff and they don't want to do that. And then you have a good client. Like, good clients don't come around. I don't know. I've had very good clients. I also want to speak to the clients that their stories. I mean, I'm not going to talk completely about them, but there have been some very good people in my life who have treated me very well. And there was a woman in Pacific Heights who was very, very loving to me. And I helped her reach areas of her life where she didn't know existed. And she paid very good tips. And when the relationship became blurred, I knew we had to cut off at some point. I just knew that's why I cannot do this kind of work with friends. Like this they had to be, at some point we had to cut it off. But back to this, so I get the difference between me and other workers that I have found, especially going to your question, the global South, is that there are just these economic differences. I don't know if I don't feel comfortable using privilege but it is sort of different when I have been a trade of different kind of, I have different ways to make money. This is one way to make money, but I have other ways. And I cannot say the same for them because opportunities are not there. The economic pressures are greater. And some of those traumatic experiences are it's like conditioning. Pavlov, there's something there that I don't think just me visiting and having a little bit peer-to-peer conversation is going to fix it. Like these are like, you need to have rehab, and I give it that need a lot of work with folks that don't know anything else but to give pleasure, because it's too conditioned in there from childhood that they have. The word agency doesn't make any sense to some people. There's no such thing as agency. There is, I've served as this is what people need, this is what gives me food on the table, and this is what I know. Why would I do something different? And nowhere me talking about you can try this or you can try it does not, it's blocked. I cannot get through. That is someone that needs some high level of professional therapy and some real taken away from a situation. Like so I think in that way, to me, even the concept of unionizing sex workers here, like even talking about that with some people, like, why don't you, like, that concept is so foreign. So anyhow, I'm in this struggling how to figure out how to find ways to support people that are in the same field, but we're not in the same mindset. There's something very traumatic. It's very distinct, this job, this work. People think you can you just make some money. I mean, there are people like that. Great for them. They're pretty or they're handsome or whatever, and they go and become escorts and they make good money, and good for them. I think for the majority of workers in this field, you know, you go through a lot of hoops of humiliation. I certainly did. I know what I'm good for. I'm told, you know, it's weird because I can say this laughing, but I know what I'm good for, what I have, what features want, and what I'm not, what service they want, and how to flirt, how to make sure I get my bargain in it too if I'm working with other colleagues. It's stupid to say it like that, but I know it's like, okay, at 32, I'm going to be able to do this, and this is what I know. Maybe I don't have the attributes that they're looking for anymore, but I certainly can compete in this way. You know, it's weird to think that way, but it's like, what are your talents within this field? No. Yeah, Kenny.
I just wanted to clarify that I'm not saying that, you know, this is not intense. This is not, that doesn't have any cost. What I see is that, you know, there are so many other topics that cause a lot of trauma, that have a cost for people. And at least for me, it's like, I'm not saying that this doesn't matter. I absolutely care about this. I absolutely know plenty of stories. I grew up in that environment. What I'm saying is that when we all get caught up on this comparing of what is more painful than the other thing, we lose sight of our goal. And that's kind of my issue here. It's not that I don't care. I absolutely do, you know, but, you know, like someone who was, you know, held at gunpoint at the fucking border, you know, by an agent, and then thrown into an icebox, you know, and then spend time, you know, in you know, they have their own sort of intense trauma from being in this fucking system. And to me, this is one more thing, and I'm not putting it on one level or another. It's another story of what this fucking system produces, for me at least, you know.
Well, Eduardo, what do you say about, how would you like to finish this episode in terms of
I feel like I've taken so much time from other people I wanted to talk about.
Well, that's why I don't think you should say that, because I actually think we can come back to this. Because actually, this has been your story today. I'm just going to say,
right,
there's been,
Jesus,
this is your story today, but it's opened up another area for us to talk about, and we're going to be able to touch back on some of the things you've said about your story have helped me think about how I can understand this kind of work experience in relationship to other demeaning work experiences. And the question of, is there something distinct about that? That's one for us to discuss as well. But the idea of feeling lost, the idea of being demeaned and shamed, I think all of us have felt that. But I don't also want to take away from the fact that I really do feel like you've helped me see in an area that I haven't been in. Oh, that's how a person walks through that, you know, and that's how a person gets there. At least that's how it's your journey. There's probably other people got there a different way, but it makes sense. So I want to give you the floor to kind of like, maybe what was important about the video, if you want to come back to that, and then what do you want us, the three of us, and then our people who are listening, to take away from this episode that's really about your story in this field?
I imagined that I had prepared for a 15 minutes walk through this, and then it became this. I don't know how I felt. You see, I always fall. I'm kidding. I fall into these traps of, which has helped also in a way, because I thought I was going to talk about, you know, sex tech, and that way I wasn't going to be so nervous talking about this topic. But I guess we've entered here. So let's see. I do want to mention one point. So you said, what are the price? What are the benefits? I don't know if they're benefits. I don't like that word benefits, but maybe the word, what have I come to learn or develop from sort of these experiences? I have learned how to have self-respect for myself, explored sexual areas of myself, my identity, as people always try to ask you, what do you identify as? My identity is it's not fixed, because it's just, I realized how human my experiences have been with just whatever gender or if whatever gender they are, if they're a woman or a man, they want to explore an area of themselves, that's fine. And I have explored those areas with them. So it's to me, the identity part is difficult for me. And people like to use these labels in the LGBTQ plus alphabet world. And I have struggles around it. I kind of see people, I guess that's a benefit, that I've seen people be, I guess the only thing about my clients is that they were willing to act on their fantasies. They were willing to pay someone to do something that everyone else holds in their head, even if it was a slight 1 second thought. I wonder what that would be like. I wonder what that smells like. I wonder what that tastes like. I wonder what it would be like with him. Or I wonder what if I did this with that person. Like, everyone has a thought. I know this. And if you've done any sort of alternative, like drug-inducing kind of out there reality, surreal experiences, your mind will spin. And my clients, their minds spin, but they were willing to say, I have the money and I want to try this. And so I don't think that it's defined. I think humans are just humans. I'm not talking about sex right now. I'm just talking about like their attraction. I think attraction is very fluid, and I think attraction can be very, yes, of course, there are people who are like, no, this is just what I like. That's fine. I respect that. But in most people's minds, it tends to be those thoughts there are wandering thoughts, and people can act on them or they don't act on them. So that's one thing I have learned. Another thing that I think I've come to appreciate from this work is the relationships, which is strange. I'm not very good at being a robot. Even when I'm an interpreter, I'm just not very good at being robotic with people. The relationships I have built, even with my friends and even with just people I meet a little bit, I have an innate desire to want to connect very strongly. And that is something very appealing with some clients. A lot of them don't just seek out. I've been in sessions where I thought I came with my rucksack and I had toys and I had lube and I had and disinfectant and I had everything ready, right? You coming with your toolbox, and then they went through a shitty day, and you're sitting there, and I thought, I'm ready. I'll just say I clean myself out for anything, and yet I think I'll edit that part out. But but then I sit there, I'm showered, I'm like ready for anything, and this person is crying, and they're married, or this is an older gay man who just is not interested in any sort of pleasure right now. They just want to talk to somebody, and sometimes that's what you're hired for. You're just there to talk. Some people have experienced feeling like no one likes them. No one is sexually attracted to them. And that's why they hire. Like, that's also been part of my work as a sexual surrogate. I know there are people with disabilities. I know what people I would not be with someone who had Down syndrome, for example, but I would be with someone who was in a wheelchair, and I know is fully conscious of their body and their autonomy, and they're not able to have pleasure, right? Hold on. They're not able to have pleasure because people are not attracted to them, or they see them as weak, or they think they're impotent. And women who also feel like they're overweight, they may not feel like anyone loves them, or I've been in many situations where I think that's my talent, maybe, if that's what it is giving people that security of who they are. We're gonna wrap up because I think it's getting crowded in here. So that's another area that I also wanted to just explore with this conversation, was just how much society is so horrible, so terrible, that people fall into depression, loneliness, sex is repressed, like people are repressed sexually. People they're all these walks of life that I've come to know. And I think that people who experience those things deserve to be loved. And I try to provide that, except I cannot be more than that. And those relationships have crossed over sometimes, where I'm getting a bunch of text messages, I'm getting a bunch of emails, I'm being stalked on Facebook, I'm getting Instagram messages, and I can't. So I have to figure out a way to stop that. And I try to talk about these things in a calm way, but they're not able to. It's just not there. And then I feel worse when all they say is, you're the only person I've had a wonderful experience with, and then I cannot find any more pleasures with anybody. And I've tried hiring other workers like you, but they're not like you. And so I feel bad because I'm not able to have that. I'm not able to have. I cannot go back to that, right? You can't. You're not supposed to. So those are the ethics, I think, for me, that are still blurry, and also I have to maintain. Yeah, sorry, I was distracted by some of the infighting that was happening among my roommates. They're having a lot of relationship issues.
Yeah. And
he just came back from work, and there's a lot going on in this room. There's a lot going on. He doesn't like that she works in this field and la la la, and then I'm here talking about it. Obviously, they don't have to speak English about it to know what I'm talking about. The word sex is quite clear for anyone universally, so it's triggering him, and I have to talk about with him what I'm talking about. He thinks I'm talking about her in this field. Oh, it's getting all kinds of messiness.
Yeah.
So let me find a way. So yeah. Anyhow, so just about clients, I want to also, I don't know, it's weird because I have this connection and desire to want to also give a space for them. I'm not, they're the minority of, obviously, there's a majority of people who are really messed up in the head and treat you like an animal or worse. And there are people who I do think that are in the society that need a lot of, we need a lot of resources in mental health. And I'm not a professional, but that's what they hire people for. And they hire sex workers for sometimes. And we get in these messy situations where relationships, you don't know where the boundaries lie. Anyhow, so I guess where I would like for us to wrap up is if you all have questions around that. I think we've all had this good questions, and I don't think there's anything else I left out about my journey. I'm kind of exhausted talking about it. And honestly, it's going to give me emotional drain because I have never talked about it this much with other people besides my partner. And even with my partner, it's like snippets. And in therapy, it's only 1 hour. And we don't tackle everything in 1 hour either.
Well, then why don't we call it a day? I would just want to say thank you for sharing this. I can only imagine, I do think it would be exhausting to, and it's been almost 2.5 hours,
Oh my goodness. We're going to have to cut down on that.
Well, so that's the first thing I would say is,
let me find the transition. And I don't like abrupt. It feels off. It feels weird.
Yeah.
So let me find the words. Let me find a conclusion paragraph for this essay. Anyhow, I'm very appreciative for the three of you and any viewers or listeners listening to this episode. I appreciate if they've gotten to this far into this episode. I appreciate anyone listening. I don't know how this is interesting in any way, except that I think the word sex is very attention grabbing, and that's the way it is. And like I've always told former students of mine when I used to work in public education, you need to say it a bunch of times to kind of get the giggles out. So I think that this topic, this adult content, will hopefully serve anybody if they want to know what it's like in this field, or if they're curious, or even if people who have been in this field, if they want to just relate or find areas where we are connected. Great, wonderful. If this can be provided for them, great. Other than that, I had hoped we had discussed about some of the things that the work here that I have done in Colombia with other sex workers. We'll probably have that in another episode. And also sex tech, which is an area that is growing and booming in today's society. It's unfortunate, but the future of sex is changing. And I hope that maybe I'll share some videos around that. We'll discuss further on that. If I left anything out, people can always comment in the video section below in the comments, and we'll discuss it further. I don't know if anyone. I think I've tackled most questions. I'll be active in the comment section, and people can ask me questions there.
Just again, thank you for sharing. This is a lot of emotional work, and but I appreciate it. And I appreciate you as a person, and You know, like obviously, hopefully we'll talk more about it in person. But you know, like you're an amazing human, and like you have a lot of fucking stories. And I'm fortunate to meet you. And so, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, like Kenny said.
All right. Well, thank you, the three of you. This was not intended to be this way. This was supposed to be in 3 parts, but this is what it is. So
yeah, I do want to though comment on the humanity you spoke of, that you are relating to people in that in the way that you're doing, and the breadth of humanity that you're able to see. You know, like you often compliment me for being a good listener. And I feel in a similar way, you are really able to listen to people in these other areas and respond. And unfortunately, I think there's an exploitation element to the experience, but there is a gift that you have in being able to meet people at different places. And I think it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I'm still for hire. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I was going to say, if anyone on YouTube is watching this, you can pay me. Get my card on the bottom. I'm kidding. We're going to edit that out.
That's good. That's funny.
So how do we handle that? You know, how do we handle the inquiries?
The 3 of them are my secretaries. Get through them. I'm kidding. You have to kind of, in Mexico, we say, you know, you kind of laugh. Tienes que reír a ti mismo. You have to laugh at yourself, whatever. Like, some fucked up shit happened. I'm not making light of that. It's just, ¿cómo se dice? There's an expression in Spanish. What am I supposed to do? You either laugh or you cry. Like, you know, that's the way you get through. Obviously, I'm in therapy, and I think everyone should be in therapy, and I recommend it. So I'm appreciative of everyone listening. If it has helped anyone, great. So that's what this is for. And it's a little off and different for what we do on What's Left, huh? Andy, why don't you get the outro out? No, do the outro. Well, if anyone has made it this far into this episode, congratulations. Props if you have to this boring story of mine. I'm glad you have been here. And thank you for What's Left team for putting up and for being here until this hour, because it is late now. All right. So that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes where we found this episode, or on our blog at what-s-left.webnode.com. On what-s-left.webnode.com. I'm losing my English. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, Telegram, or Rumble. And you can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. And if you would like to give us feedback about something you heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Andy, Jess, and Kenny, and we'll see you all next time. Ciao.